Famous trans actor Hunter Schafer, who you may know from the HBO show Euphoria or Hunger Games: The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, is now going viral after having to deal with a passport predicament brought on by the Trump administration. You see, Hunter Schafer, who transitioned male to female, was attempting to get a passport, and of course, due to executive orders from Donald Trump, if you are a trans-identifying individual trying to get a passport, you gotta get a passport that has the biological sex you were born with on it. Now, of course, this is going to be much to the dismay of many transgender identifying individuals, and Hunter Schafer decided to make a video that has now gone massively viral about this experience. So today we're going to react to it. And full disclosure, I'm a fan of Hunter Schafer. I've seen a lot of the work that Hunter's done. I appreciate it. I admire it. I may not agree with the gender theory and the transgenderness of it all, but we can still break it down, and I can explain why I support this move from the Trump administration on passport identification and other government IDs. So here's Hunter.
Hello, Internet. I don't really post much these days, but I had a bit of a harsh reality check today and felt like it's important to share with whoever is listening. So I'm sure most of us remember on, I think, the first day of Trump's presidency, he signed an executive order to declare only two genders recognized by the state, male and female, assigned at birth. And as a result of this, which I wrote down because I want to get it right, the Bureau of Consular Affairs has frozen passport applications requesting a gender marker change or renewals or new applications with a gender marker differing from an applicant's gender assigned at birth. So my initial reaction to this, because our president, is a lot of talk, was like, I'll believe it when I see it. And today, I saw it on my new passport, male. So, now to specify, my gender markers were first changed in my teens when I first got my driver's license, and then passports following. All have been female since then. Hasn't really been a problem. However, last year when I was filming in Barcelona, our car got broken into and my bag got stolen, and inside of that was my passport, which was supposed to last me up until my 30s. And so I got an emergency passport, which was very simple at the time. It's basically just a copy of my old passport, but temporary and only supposed to be used within the year. So as soon as I got back to the States, I had to get this fixed and get it replaced with a real proper passport.
Okay, let's go ahead and pause. And this has been something that has, of course, been happening under the Trump administration. And yes, he did announce that the government is only going to acknowledge two sexes, two genders, whatever word you want to use. And on your government ID, you're going to have the gender that you were born as, the gender that developed when you were in mommy's tummy. That's what's going to be on your passport and your government identification. Now, a lot of trans people were sort of trying to fan the flames of this a little bit by heading to the passport office, trying to see if this was true. And then they were being told, yeah, this is true. In fact, some right out of the gate of this executive order being passed went to the passport office to attempt to get identification. And the passport office, because they had yet had directives on what to do with trans individuals, told them, we can't quite issue the passport yet. Now, people were freaking out online saying that this is a travel ban on trans identifying individuals. And of course, it turns out it's not a travel ban. There was just a little bit of confusion in figuring out how this was going to take place and how people were going to follow through with this executive order, which is why people like Hunter Schafer are getting male passports. Now, it's important to note that if you're a trans identifying individual who has the gender that you've chosen on your passport, you can continue to have and use that that passport up until the renewal date, which I believe is 10 years from the point that you got the initial passport. So a lot of people are not going to have to deal with this same issue, if we can call it that, as Hunter has in trying to get a new passport, now being identified as male. Now, of course, I agree with this because you are a biological male. I'll explain why I think these passports should be marked with your biological sex a little later, but I will say I can totally understand if you're a trans individual who has had identification with your gender of choice on it for quite some time, why it would be maddening or saddening to get a new bit of identification that puts you back at the gender you were assigned at birth, if that's the phrase we want to use. It does feel like a step back, but that's because our society was tripping over itself trying to move into an age of progress, if we can call it that, where we allow anybody to identify as anything they want under virtually any given circumstance. We moved in the wrong direction doing that, in my opinion, and now we have to course correct. And course correction can feel like oppression if you've been on the receiving end of the left-leaning ideological moves that made up the last, 10 years, couple decades that we've been living through this. But let's continue with Hunter Schafer's video.
Which I went to the Federal Passport Agency today in LA and did. I've had to do this one time before. No part of the process was different. I filled everything out just like I normally would. I put female, and when it was picked up today and I opened it up, they had changed the marker to male. And I'm not making this post to fearmonger or to create like drama or receive consolation. I don't need it, but I do think it's worth posting to sort of note the reality of the situation and that it is actually happening. And I was shocked. I was shocked because I don't know. I just didn't think it was actually going to happen. And like, I want to acknowledge my privilege, like not only as a like famous or like celebrity trans woman who is white and thin and can adhere to like contemporary beauty standards, and I can participate in all of that, and I pass, and it still happened.
Okay, interesting points there. This is why I've been a fan of Hunter Schafer, not only because I think she's talented or he's talented, whatever you want to use at this point. I guess we're reverting back to he in this case. Because Hunter Schafer seems to be pretty normal when it comes to addressing these things. In the past, we've addressed Hunter Schafer on this show because he posted old diary entries of what it was like to go through transition and to think about whether or not he thought he was trans because of some sort of outside influence or some sort of internal influence, and I can admire that bit of honesty. I also admire that he's saying, you know what, I don't need, consolation for this. I don't need you guys to pity me. I'm just letting you know that this is happening. And Hunter Schafer is in an interesting position as a trans person who is passing for the most part, even with, all the different markers that we would typically see in trans identifying individuals who are transitioning to be women. Hunter sort of flies under the radar. So it does become an interesting question. At what point in this journey of flying under the radar as a woman does society start to treat you like one? And Hunter has been in the experience of being treated like a woman for a lot of their transition, which is not the case for most trans women. But then you usher yourself into a new debate. Do you have to get into a certain space of passing as a woman in order to be treated like one, in order to have that on your government identification? People on the left would call that being a trans medicalist, which in fact Hunter Schafer has been accused of being in the past and created a ton of controversy surrounding that conversation. And then it becomes this confusing thing of there being trans women women who are self-identified and look like full-on biological males. There are trans women who identify as women and are somewhere in the middle of their procedures and their transition, and you can still tell they're male. And then there's the Hunter Schafers and the Blair Whites of the world that are far along in their transition and quite frankly, could trick a lot of people into thinking that they are biological females. And if we allow one group to be treated as such, especially in government identification, does that then become oppression of the other groups? And if it's creating that much confusion, that many questions, maybe we revert back to what we were doing, which was acknowledging biological sex and saying, hey guys, there are two genders, two sexes. There are people who like to switch them around and get medical procedures, and they truly believe deep down that they are in fact a woman when they were born a man, or that they are a man when they were born a woman. But we as a society and our government is not going to recognize the struggle that these individuals are dealing with and the mental affliction that they are dealing with. And for the longest time, that's where we've been as a society. And now it's getting confusing because we went into this age of changing everything up, and we now have to revert back to, in my opinion, what makes sense and what has always made sense, being labeled with your biological sex. But I have sympathy for those who are experiencing this after having a period where society fed into and gave blind affirmation towards their own thoughts about their gender and sex.
And I never had my birth certificate changed. So this has led me to believe that I think the agencies who are in charge of passports and this sort of thing are now required to cross-reference birth certificates, or I don't know exactly what, or what changed as far as the processing goes, but this is the first time, excuse me, this has happened to me since I changed my gender marker. We're coming up on a decade now or something. And I do believe it is a direct result of the administration our country is currently operating under.
Pause. I also think it's a direct result of people feeding into, for lack of a better word, the delusion that you can change your gender and sex. And had we not fed into that idea and allowed our realities to bend to the whims of others, realities that they created for themselves that are in no way, shape, or form in line with science and research, we wouldn't be in this place. So now you're dealing with a small percentage of the population that already is dealing with mental anguish and an incongruence with their mind and body, and now you're giving them further strife. But it's because the progressives of the past decided to just usher forward this push towards, I don't know, gender fluidness and this ability to have 10,000 different sexes and gender identities, when they should have never done that in the first place, because it wasn't backed by science. And I know that's not what a lot of people are going to think, but we can look to major medical institutions, all of which happen to exist outside of this country, because our country has been injected with woke ideology for a very long time now, to see that maybe this is not the direction we should have moved in. I'll point you in the direction of Finland or Germany or France or the UK, which is now on their own journey towards what should be what we're doing here in the United States.
And I guess I'm just sort of scared of the way this stuff like slowly gets implemented, because things just sort of like start happening. I think as we've seen in like historical rises of fascism and this sort of, everything that this new administration kind of represents, there's a lot of talk, and then things start happening, and we start to normalize the circumstances we're under. And I just feel like it's important to share that it's not just talk.
This is not fascism, by the way. I don't know that I really need to tell you guys that, but this is not fascistic.
That this is real and it's happening. And no one, no matter their circumstance, no matter how wealthy or white or pretty or whatever, is excluded. This is real. I also want to say, I don't give a fuck that they put an M on my passport. It doesn't change really anything about me or my transness. However, it does make life a little harder. Personally, I haven't tested it out yet. I'll find out next week when I have to travel abroad for the first time with my new passport. But I'm pretty sure it's gonna come along with having to out myself to like Border Patrol agents and that whole gig much more often than I would like to or is really necessary. And this is just my personal circumstance. And thinking about other trans women who this might also be happening to, or other trans people, you know, the list only gets longer as far as the intricacies that come along with the difficulty that this brings into like real life shit. This is getting very long, but I just want to say, trans people are beautiful. We are never going to stop existing.
Okay. Nobody thinks that. You're going to stop existing. I guess if you follow it to its logical conclusion of getting rid of gender theory, we hope that this doesn't become, a social contagion for the ages, although it already has for this generation. It's really interesting to hear about the difficulties that I think Hunter Schafer is probably going to be pretty singular in experiencing, considering that, again, she flies under the radar as a woman. So I think there is going to be a lot of having to say, oh yeah, I'm trans. Oh yeah, I'm trans. Oh yeah, I'm trans. Now, why that would be an issue outside of the person you're telling having an adverse reaction, I'm not sure. You are a male who has transitioned to be a female, and we should acknowledge that on your government identification. And for the most part, what this administration is doing is just, we're going to bounce back to reality in that sense. They put a ban on federal funding towards children being able to transition. So if you are an adult who is experiencing gender dysphoria and you feel like you want to transition to become a female or, get all these different injections and go through the whole medical process of becoming a trans individual who's gone that route, you are more than welcome to do so. We're just going to have you labeled on your government ID of your biological sex, and we're not going to allow minors to do that. So for the most part, really nothing has changed. This is not some fascist government who is trying to erase your existence. We're just being honest about the status of your existence. So I'm not sure, again, I can understand why it feels like oppression, because people just let everything run wild for, a few terms here. And then we have to return back to normalcy, because normalcy is what's needed. Not to mention the amount of difficulty that transgenderism and gender ideology has put everyone else through in our society, has put women through with their spaces, their privacy, their sports, has put our language through in the different depictions of what it means to be a woman, a man, a birthing person, a mother, all these different changes. Women's safety when it's come to crimes committed against women by biological males who identify as women and they're being labeled as female. So I want to acknowledge the struggle that could be gone through by a transgender individual who's suddenly being shocked by this being their government identification. But I have to express this is why it's happening. And you might think government identification is something small. Why can't I just put what I want on it? But the slippery slope does in fact exist. We've been experiencing the slippery slope that exists for quite some time. And when you give an inch, a mile is taken. If I grant that the world should view you as female on your government identification, why not play in women's sports? Why not go to the women's bathroom? Why not go to the women's part of the spa? Why not, if you are a sex offender who's put in a male prison, transition you to a female prison? In fact, your government identification says female on it. You have a passport that says female on it. Why should all of our society not just treat you as the woman that you've been labeled as on your government identification? And these are genuine and valid concerns that many are going to label as being transphobic, or they're going to say I'm a TERF for saying so. But we've watched as time and time again, these concerns that have been sort of shrugged off turned into actual, valid, tangible problems that we are dealing with in society right now. So you might see a trans individual who's very saddened by having their government identification changed, and I understand why, but this is a necessary step that we have to go through in order to return to normalcy. And with that, we'll close out on Hunter's video.
I'm never gonna stop being trans. A letter and a passport can't change that, and fuck this administration. And I don't really have an answer on what to do about this, but I feel it was important to share. This is real. So, yeah, fuck.
Okay. If a letter on your passport doesn't change your transness, why are we talking about it? Be labeled as the journey that you went through, which is male to female. And most trans people say that they're super proud of this identity. They're super proud of this journey that they've gone through. That's a significant symbol of the journey that you've gone through. And if you're an adult who wants to transition to be a woman, or a woman who wants to be a man, by all means, do what you want to do with your body. But don't come to society and say, you must affirm everything that I believe I am. That's really the end of it. It creates so many other issues that go far beyond the scope of what exists on your government identification. And hopefully that can be understood. It's not out of hatred for trans people or people who struggle through gender dysphoria. It's in fact not a struggle that I would wish on my worst enemy. And this is just part of the conversation that needs to be had in regard to that struggle and in regard to the mental illness that many in society seem to be experiencing right now. I don't think there's any other case in which we would make changes for somebody who's dealing with a mental affliction in order for them to feel better about what they see on their government identification. So why is it that we do this for, or we have historically done this for this small portion of the population? Let me know in the comments down below. Again, you know, much love to Hunter Schafer, although I don't think Hunter Schafer is going to be very fond of this message. But this is the reality. And for a long time, we have not been living in reality. Guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comments down below. As always, I encourage healthy debate, so do get out, but do so respectfully. And if you like this video, like, subscribe, click the notification bell to be notified every single time I post a video for you guys, which is every day. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye.